responded to the survey. 73% say bias is in news reporting is a major issue, which mirrors those earlier numbers. And 54% think that inaccuracies or errors, as I mentioned earlier, are intentional. And 28% believe the facts are fabricated. That's some pretty stunning numbers when you think about trying to do this job on a daily basis. And 79% feel that news organizations try to persuade them rather than inform them. Now, here's probably was the most stunning bit of data to me. When Reuters, which is another very respected organization, news and research, do you trust the news media in your country? Anybody want to hazard a guess which country finished dead last? The United States. Ranked last among 48 countries in media trust. And trust is polarized, not just declining. I think most of you probably know about the polarization of our politics. There's also a really strong polarization in media. And these are from recent survey conducted by the Pew Center in June 2025, just this summer on trust. 58% of Democrats trust CNN, 58% of Republicans distrust it. Now you flip that to Fox, 56% of Republicans trust Fox News, 64% of Democrats distrust it. Here is another one that I found particularly stunning. Only 41% trust PBS, 31% trust the AP. I had to go and look into that a little further. You know, AP is is about as middle of the road as you can get in terms of any sort of perceived philosophy they are driving their editorial coverage. And the Wall Street Journal, 30%. I think a lot of the news product of the Wall Street Journal is one of the best in the country. It's the editorial page that often people think about when they think that it is biased. That's my opinion. But I think the issue with the AP is perhaps a lot of the people who responded to the survey might not be entirely sure what the AP is because it's a little more behind the scenes than some of the other organizations. But nevertheless, those are three really prominent news organizations in the country, and they're only garnering about a third of the public trust, which is pretty disappointing. So if I were to ask you all how much, or do you trust the national media? How many of you would say, I definitely trust the national media? Who has some trust in the national media? And does anybody totally distrust the national media? Well, those are, you know, that pretty much mirrors also the findings in the survey. It turns out that younger generations are more apt to not have as much trust in the media. So I think a lot of times my Generation X and the boomers get, vilified for, maintaining our silos for either Republican-leaning or conservative-leaning or liberal-leaning news organizations. But the survey findings show that it filters down all the way to 20-year-olds. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your generation calls itself. Where are we now? Is this Generation Alpha or is this?
We've got Gen Z.
Okay, Gen Z.
We've got a few millennials, and we've got maybe a Generation Alpha, but I don't think so. I think they're really, really young.
So what is alphas are like under 12 or?
I'm guessing they're like under 12.
Okay, all right. Well, I should really.
I'm sorry, I'm older millennial. My bad. See, that's the right answer for Lolly.
Do any of you have a guess about what has caused the decline of trust in the media? That's a good guess. Anybody else? It actually goes back a little bit before that. Historical bias in journalism is not new. Back in the 19th century, they established newspapers strictly for the purpose of political propaganda. That's why some newspapers, and even in our state, you will see newspapers that are named the Democrat or the Republican. That doesn't really mean anything today other than that's been the franchise's name for over a century now. But back in the 19th century, it meant what their politics were. So this problem goes way back, but it's been exacerbated by other issues over the 20th century. And the big change came in the 1990s. For years, CNN, which was founded in 1980, I believe, was the only national news channel. CBS, ABC, NBC all had their news departments, but CNN was the first 24-hour news organization on television. And it was, I remember it well, it was pretty vanilla. It was straight news. There was some sports shows, there were some showbiz shows, but most of the schedule was just reading headlines of the day and maybe delving a little deeper into some topics. Their political journalism or their talking head shows were practically non-existent at the point. There was one on the network in the evening called Crossfire. Some of you may be just a little bit old enough to remember that. They took it off the air in the mid-2000s. But basically it was just somebody on the left and somebody on the right and a guest in the middle, and they just yelled at each other for half an hour. But that was just a half hour a day. You compare that now to what you will see on any cable news network at this point, and it's a pretty stark difference. So the impact and the advent of cable news and social media on journalism standards absolutely has caused some of the decline in trust of media. And as we mentioned, there's been increased political polarization and the rise of digital news outlets based on ideology. So the online news outlets that have a political perspective are a lot like those newspapers in the 19th century that were created strictly for conservative or liberal viewpoints. And of course, shrinking newsroom resources. That's been a chronic problem for the last 20 years. It's goes hand in glove also with what I was mentioning earlier about how much easier it is to do certain jobs. Newspapers now don't need part-timers to develop film. Technology has replaced that job. So as the technology improved and resources also shrank, staffs probably shrunk way more than they should have. And that has created the perception that there's just not enough people out there to do this job, or who can be paid to do it. Another recent research paper that has been discussed by CFINR is the Beyond Objectivity research program that was conducted at the Walter Cronkite School out in Arizona. Shows that advocacy over objectivity has become, a chronic concern as well in this industry. So the Center for Integrity in News Reporting was created 2 years ago specifically to address this issue. And again, I'm only involved in the periphery of this effort. I serve as a judge on their committee when they have their annual awards program. So the solution that they are offering is that every news organization should have a written statement of objectivity and their mission statement published in every edition of either the newspaper or published on their website, so that the public can go there and know what that organization's mission is. And Walter Hussman has been doing this for a long time at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and if you call that paper up online, you can see their written statement there. So they want you to say that you are committed to promoting impartial, objective, and fair journalism. And one of the key initiatives that they have launched is the aforementioned News Prize that they are now offering nationwide. They gave out $125,000 in awards earlier this year, $25,000 per category. Is anybody in here reporting for the Roy Howard Center? You're all eligible to enter your work into this contest. So I will make sure that Nicole gets information about it when the deadline comes up. It will come up in early winter, I think. Here's a look at some of the winners from last year. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. They have awards in print, broadcast television, cable TV, digital media, and last year the White House Correspondents Association, they also took part in this ceremony. So you all at the Roy Howard Center would be eligible to compete in the digital category. But each one of these winners, and sometimes there was a team of winners, was awarded $25,000 cash prize from the center. So that has gained a lot of traction, I believe, in bringing more attention to this issue and how to address it. I actually was a judge on the print winner, and the young woman who won it, Cleo, I can't read her last name there, but she wrote a very touching and rather epic story about her experiences with her parent, who was not her parent, but elderly individuals who were going into long-term care and the struggles that they faced finding good care for these senior citizens. And it actually led to some major changes in Wisconsin law. The other initiatives that they're talking about is leadership. They want to invite distinguished leaders to journalism schools. Hopefully, I'm not saying I'm distinguished, but hopefully some of that is transpiring here at Southern Miss. And emphasize how impartial reporting builds public trust. And the core statement of values I mentioned earlier, this is just a sample of that. That's the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on the right. I'm not sure which newspaper that is on the left. That takes up a lot of space, but I think it also makes a pretty important statement in each edition. Public engagement and support. One of the reasons I chose to speak on this topic today was simply to bring more awareness to it. They're targeting mid-sized United States markets, 25 to 75 of those with awareness, informational calls to action. This is where newsrooms across the country, I'm sorry to say, none in Mississippi yet, but we're working on it, have adopted that core values statement and have begun publishing it in print and online. If you go to the Center for Integrity's website, cfinr.org, you'll learn more about this effort and can see the samples of the winning work from the last 2 years. This is their board leadership. That's General Wesley Clark on the top left. Of course, Brett Baer is known to many folks there on the right. He's the primary news anchor on Fox. There to maintain balance and objectivity in the organization's mission. Between the two on the top, General Clark appears quite regularly on CNN. Linda Cassell is with Stevens Media. She's the bottom left. That's Eliza Gaines in the middle. She is the current publisher of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and that's Charles Overby on the right. If you don't know who Charles Overby is, you should make a note of it. He was editor of the Clarion-Ledger in Jackson in 1982, and they won a Pulitzer Prize for public service. For their coverage of the issue of education in Mississippi that led to some pretty massive reforms here back in the 1980s. And Charles is a terrific guy and is a chair of the Overby Center for Southern Journalism and Politics at Ole Miss. So how can you help? And this is directed particularly to the Roy Howard Center. Establish that core statement of journalistic values. Cling to transparency and accountability for everything that you do. Make sure that that's top of mind in your reporting. Educate your readers, viewers, and audience to the problem of media bias and what you're doing to address it. Partner and collaborate with the center. Support those polling efforts so that we can continuously have updated data. And participate in the center's annual awards contest. That's the QR code so that you can learn more about the center in particular and or make a donation to the center. But the website will also have details on the forthcoming awards cycle. So that's it on the issue of media objectivity. I did want to spend a few minutes today to talk to you about the Press Association itself. We were founded in the 19th century ourselves. We're one of the oldest associations in the nation doing what we do. It goes back to the 1860s. We're the sixth oldest press association in the United States, and you know, I always joke that nobody argues for that distinction, so nobody ever calls us on it, but it is actually true. And we are one of the oldest professional associations in Mississippi. And So we represent all of the print newspapers in Mississippi and the digital news outlets as well. The Roy Howard Center is one of our newest members. We're a three-headed monster. We also run Mississippi Press Services, which is a marketing and management company, and the Mississippi Press Foundation, which was founded in 1983 to promote journalism education and to provide scholarships and internships to students of journalism in the state. So our mission also for the foundation is evolving. We are becoming more involved in the philanthropic space. That has become a huge part of supporting local journalism as the model of traditional newspapers and broadcast television is being rewritten. You just can't make the money that you need to make to support a reasonably sized staff on advertising and subscription revenue anymore. So we're asking for asking for direct support from readers and news consumers. Now I want to talk a little bit about the summer internship program. We fund up to 15 newsroom internships each summer. And so you get paid an hourly wage plus a stipend for living expenses. And if you're interested in that program, you can contact Monica Gilmer here. She'll send you a candidate profile that we will keep on file and help the newsrooms that are approved to participate in this program next year connect with the interested intern applicants. We don't actually place the interns, but we will connect you with the newsrooms that will have availability next year. Also, at some point next year, I'm not sure if one will open in the winter, but I'll find out and let Nicole know. We will have 2 scholarship openings in 2026. These are $1,000 scholarships for each semester, so it's up to $2,000 per year, or $8,000 through the course of your journalism education career. Again, Monica Gilmer there is the contact, and she can send to you a application if you are interested in that. We have 2 seniors in the program right now. I'm not sure if one graduates in December, so there may be an opening in the spring, but there definitely will be openings in the fall. So, now it's your turn. What questions do you have? I know I'm the only one standing between you and lunch.
How is the transition from you guys, developing film to using more up-to-date technology?
Well, it wasn't just film and digital cameras. When I first started doing this, I worked, as I said, in the production department, and there would be these huge rows of equipment, and all that equipment would do would be print out spooled copy that would have to be cut and placed onto, pasted down, we called it, onto newspaper pages. So it took, my hometown newspaper was a daily afternoon newspaper that basically only ran about 12 pages a day, so it was not a large newspaper, but it took a team of 6 people in the production department to produce that newspaper every day. And we ran 2 shifts because we were producing the paper in West Point and the paper in Starkville. And it was printed at the West Point plant. So it took two teams of 12 people total to produce those 2 small daily newspapers. The Macintosh arrived, I was telling Nicole earlier. I've worked on Mac computers since 1989. They arrived in the office. 2 computers took out those entire row of production equipment. We call them typesetters. And from between 1989 and 1991, the production department went from 12 people to 4. So it was a tough transition for those people, who actually worked in the production department, but it made the production of the product much easier and more efficient. And then, of course, here comes the internet another decade later, and the belief, one of the major flaws or errors in judgment in my industry back in around the year 2000 was that we would be able to continue making a mint on advertising online. That when our papers ascended to the great beyond in the digital realm, that we would just take our advertising with us. Well, Facebook and Google had other ideas about that. So that's where where a lot of those ad dollars have gone. But you all know in just your lifetimes how much things have changed. I presume the iPhone came along in your lifetimes. And it totally was a game changer. Being able to file stories, respond to text messages or emails from in the field was just pretty remarkable. I remember sitting around with some journalism educators at dinner one night. Somebody had an iPhone, and one of them was like, "I'll never use one of those." And I was still wrapping my mind around, why would anybody text somebody? Why wouldn't you just call them? And now I don't want people to call them. So it's just been a total game changer, technology in the last 30 years.
I want to ask, for the organizations that are pushing for these newsrooms to develop like core values or mission statement for that transparency, have they seen like a difficulty in getting these newsrooms to develop those statements? Or has it been like relatively easy to get them to do so?
I think most people or most organizations that are approached are receptive to the idea. When you think about it, there's really no drawback to it. Even if you can't dedicate space in the printed publication, to have it on your websites is really no great burden for anybody. It's just so many journalism organizations today have one objective, and that is to get the story published. I used to say get the paper out. That is not as relevant today, but to get the story published, because everybody's crunched for time. And their intentions are good, but it is committing the time to sit down and draft that core statement. Who writes it? The publisher, the editor, a committee from the community. There are just a lot of decisions to make about it. So I do think it's expanding, but it takes a commitment to get it done. Yes, sir.
So I know you were talking a lot about traditional platforms and the digital world we're in right now. And I know as communication students or students of the School of Media Communication, we talk a lot about media conversions. So at the Mississippi Press Association, what does that kind of look like for you guys in today's fast-paced media landscape?
Well, it is trying to keep apprised of what all of the changes are, and when something like TikTok comes along and you think that's just another social media platform, do we really need another social media platform? And then when you begin to realize how it's impacting all other forms of media, you can no longer just ignore it. You have to make your members aware of it and provide the training for them to use it and incorporate it into their editorial mission if they are receptive to it. A lot of our papers are not. 80% of the members of the Mississippi Press Association are small, rural weekly newspapers. And they are continuing to, do things. To say this sounds like a criticism, I don't mean it that way, but a lot of them are still doing things the way they've always done them. And it's just because change on that level is so not rapid in small town rural America. You wouldn't just apply it to the media there. So it's not become prevalent, but you still have to, because we represent organizations from Mississippi Today all the way down to the Leland Progress, which is a 600 circulation newspaper in the Delta. You still have to make sure that you're offering programs of use and value to all of them.
Just to kind of add on to that, so in your experience, what do you feel, how would you say is the most ideal way to take a story that's maybe more appropriate for traditional media platforms and take that and apply it to, for example, TikTok in an effective way where it's still reaching an audience, it's still making a difference the same way it would in traditional?
If I were going to go out and work again as an editor, it would be, and I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but it would be something I would want to try, and I'm sure that's what's happening here in a lot of respects, is to make sure that the content is accurate and that we are promoting it on all of those channels. The root, the main story may still appear in print, it may appear online, but you need to make sure that you're using X. I've just now trained myself to say X, and TikTok or whatever social media platforms are most relevant to promote that content. Drive those audiences to your main products. And then we can get into a whole other debate about how much anger you feel when you get there and it's behind a paywall. But I am very torn about paywalls. I really love the Daily Memphian in Memphis. It's an online outlet, but they don't give you a single article for free. And I think to myself, I really want to subscribe to the Daily Memphian. It's $17 a month. But I don't live in Memphis. I don't really have any vested interest in Memphis. So you have to draw your line at you have to set your budget on your media consumption, because we're all probably subscribed to far too many things. But anyway, that was a diatribe on paying for news. But somebody's got to pay the bill for news. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask news consumers to cover part of it. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned earlier about like errors. What would you say to like people who are scared to make that mistake? How do they pick themselves back up after they make a mistake and get like the trust of their audience?
You've just got to go forward. I mean, there's no going back. You can't correct the error. And I will tell you, I talked about that headline era, which in the grand scheme of things didn't amount to anything. But it was at a weekly newspaper, and back then there was no digital edition. That era stayed on the front page of every copy of that newspaper in that county until they were thrown away. And at least a week it was out there. In a daily paper, you can correct the error in the next day's edition, or in online, theoretically, you correct it just as soon as it's brought to your attention. And I hope that you're trained to amend your stories to show that it's a later corrected version. But there are some errors that stick with you, and I will say the worst error I ever made, and I probably should have lost my job, but I had a very good editor and publisher who gave me another chance. I transposed the names of a victim and a perpetrator, and that's not the right word, of a fatal car crash. So I had the survivor as the one who caused the crash, or the victim as the one who caused the crash, and the survivor as the one who had actually died. That was just devastating to me. And it was because I had a good talking to from my colleagues at the newspaper. And I took some licks, obviously, from the readers on that. But you just have to learn from the mistake and move forward. You've got to put one foot in front of the other and get back to work. And just be really, really careful. But I'm not sure if that had happened to me as a manager without the benefit of having been through it, that I would have kept that reporter. I certainly would have moved him off the beat. But I'm not sure I would have. What would you have done, Nicole?
Well, I probably wouldn't have fired them, but it probably would have been like, you're suspended.
Yeah.
Or you need to go back through training.
Yeah.
Because that is it ruins credibility.
It does. It was an era of rushing. It was boy, I'm really dating myself here. We would get police reports over the fax machine. So basically, they would send you the fax of the incident report via fax, and now, a lot of police departments wouldn't even be that forthcoming. And I took the fax and I wrote the story from the information and called and confirmed a few things with the officer on duty. But I just got those names transposed. And, and now I wonder, why wasn't somebody double checking behind me? But that's no excuse. I was the one who made the error. So you just got to, hopefully nothing like that ever happens to you, but I am evidence that you can overcome it, if nothing else.
I have a question.
Yes?
So we have a number of folks who are trying to get internships, whether it be over the summer or during the fall, and I know you mentioned about the internships that you all do. Can you talk a little bit about what an ideal application for an internship should look like?
It should be like your hard news articles. It should be to the point. You include a little bit in there about why you think you would be a good intern, what skills you would bring to the table. Be sure and include a clip or two, or more than one clip. If you have them, that's, I don't even know if you call them clips anymore, but samples of your work. Always be cultivating those and keeping those at the ready. And don't be afraid after you've sent, it works a little different from us because we're just providing your candidate profile to participate in newsrooms. So we're not really placing you in any newsroom. But if you are pursuing a internship at a specific news organization, don't be afraid to call them and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I've submitted my application. If you have any questions, please let me know, because I think that shows initiative. And the industry needs more people who are not afraid to make the phone call.
To kind of ask a second question off of that. So you get the internship. What should students be looking to get out of the internship? Like, and I know it depends on different organizations and outlets, but in general, if I'm doing an internship, like what should I expect to get out of it?
I don't know what most of you in the room, your goal would be after you graduate in terms of what kind of job you'd like to have. But if I could make one recommendation to you all is go work in a newsroom where you don't really have any ambition to be there after you graduate, because you will learn so much about the industry that you have not thought about before. So basically what I'm saying is go work in a small town newspaper. You'll be doing everything from writing the major stories of the day to helping sweep out the trash, and that is not a bad thing because you'll have a greater understanding of how the media works at the local level, and you will also realize that most folks, it's kind of like politicians. You know, we like to lump all the politicians in Washington and to a lesser extent in Jackson together and say, well, you know, they are who they are and they're not really representing our interests. And I think a lot of people feel that way about the media. They lump us all together from a national perspective, but a lot of people like their local newsroom. And, you know, they don't want it, they want it to be there. They do trust it. And I think working at the local level in a place like Mississippi, you have a far greater understanding of that. Yes?
Hi, in the back. Talking about developing yourself throughout those internships, we talk a lot about like building a beat system, building resources and contacts and all that kind of stuff. What would your advice be for these guys on how to learn a beat, how to build a beat, especially in rural America?
Well, and you know, if you did work at a small town paper, it's going to be everything. You know, from local government to healthcare, and it's just important. I think the answer is kind of the same. When you have an opportunity to work in environments like that, you get a much greater understanding of how the world works, in my opinion. Whereas if you are working, if you go immediately and intern at I don't want to pick on Mississippi Today because it's a very valued member of the association, but if you go and intern at Mississippi Today, you are going to be working on a very narrow beat. And I think this is just a personal plea to all of you to consider journalism at another level, because local journalism is of great concern right now, not because of distrust in the media, but because I don't like the term news desert, and I'm just way off on a tangent now, Whitney, so forgive me, but you know, we're seeing a number of places now in the United States that don't have local news at all. No local newspaper, no local radio, and certainly you might have a blogger or two out there, but they certainly don't have the resources to cover the news like it should be covered. So I think if some of you are willing to go experience news at the local level, that will strengthen the whole pipeline from top to bottom. But I just encourage you to pursue internships and to have that experience because walking into a regular job interview with experience as an intern is just incredibly valuable.
has gone down, and it's been like due to just even back in like the historical political affiliation with it. So, how can media frame certain content to where the viewer can become more dependent on that particular news outlet? Because personally for me, I feel like social media has gotten worse over time with AI and just like how like certain platforms like say certain things about like the news stories that they produce. I still see like that political affiliation. Like it's kind of giving like not dependable anymore. Like I don't know because like they're still like credible, you know, because they've been in the game for so long. But it's like they're not really doing what they're supposed to do, if that makes sense.
Well, you know, the dirty little secret is that news, you know, we always hear that if it bleeds, it leads, that if it's bad news, it gets a lot of attention. And there's a lot of truth to that because the truth, the whole truth is news by and large is boring. You know, government news that's, you know, not a scandal is extremely valuable, but people don't necessarily seek it out. And the broadcast outlets, cable outlets in particular, and to a lesser extent other media, have figured out that if you can feed people's hunger for turmoil with talking heads on television, that leads to increased attention, better viewership, and that's why they have a hard time breaking away from that model, because if they go back to just straight news like CNN was in 1990, the ratings will collapse. And I think that's evidence that a lot of news, and I use the air quotes there, a lot of news is entertainment and it's not journalism. It's a tremendous problem, and I don't know how to solve it because it's kind of almost like an addiction. People get into their silos by what they consume. Their podcasts are very much part of this conversation. Their television viewing and their online reading. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but having more reporters out there who operate objectively and transparently, I think is probably the best route to a solution. Yes.
I have two questions. One, we talked a little bit, I don't have to each other, but
It's accurate. That's just, it's overused, I think.
we cover a lot of those areas, so we ran into a lot of instances where they're not used to working with the media, they're not used to us talking to them or trying to talk to them, especially officials in those areas, and a lot of times you kind of need that official, you know, source. So do you have any recommendations about going around that situation?
That goes back to like a civic club presentation I used to make, or occasionally I would go present to like the League of Cities or the Municipal League to newly elected public officials about how to work with the media. And the best advice I have for that is to go see these folks before you're actually coming to get their comment or to use them as a source or to find out what's going on. Just go introduce yourself and say, I'm Jane so-and-so with the Roy Howard Center at Southern Miss. I just wanted to come say hello and say, you know, you're part of our coverage area, and you know, we may be calling on you from time to time, and you know, we're looking forward to learning more about the community, yada, 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 and do you have any questions of me or what we do? And it's a lot harder to ignore someone's phone call or email if they already know you. And part two?
So with the younger generation, my generation, we consume a lot of news through social media, and there's a lot of fake news and a lot of misinformation going out there. And you know, as a journalist, I want to stop the spread of misinformation, but sometimes it can come off the wrong way by saying, "Hey, this is fake news." How do you recommend politely and respectfully telling someone that what they're sharing is wrong?
That is an excellent question. You know, the whole issue of AI is just so brand new to all of us. I mean, we've heard about AI for years, and anybody who sat through Terminator 2 in 1991 when it came out would say that's preposterous, and now it's all I think about. But I am pretty hardcore in my belief that if AI is used to generate something, that it must be acknowledged, or a watermark must be there, or something to let people know. Because I'm getting all of this sludge fed to me on Facebook or whatever now of just cats crawling into cradles and bathing infants. And it's quite obviously, just meant to make everybody go, oh, but it's inauthentic. It's artificially created. And I don't really have a problem with people creating it as a form of art, but I want to know that that's not real. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago and for association execs, and a few folks were talking about, oh yeah, I use AI to produce my board minutes now, or I use it to write this introduction to such and so on. And I didn't say anything, but another person in the room asked these folks, do you disclose that you used artificial intelligence? And they were like, well, no. And they had a debate back and forth, and so I finally said, well, here's another question. Do you think that it should be disclosed when reporters or journalists use artificial intelligence in their reporting? And they were like, well, absolutely. I think that's an interesting double standard there. I don't know what the answer is, but AI is an incredible tool. I have used it, and it's amazing that just in the last 5 years how much better it's gotten. I asked it to write me a biography of myself when ChatGPT first came to my awareness, and it wrote a 3-block paragraph about me, and the first paragraph was largely accurate, and the second and third were just wildly inaccurate. But now if you ask it to do that, I mean, if you have even a modest presence online and you ask AI to write a summary about this individual, it's pretty close to being totally accurate. So that is an incredibly useful tool, but there is so much potential for skullduggery, if you will let me use a 19th century word, and harm that could come from its misuse that I have always, I'm a free market kind of guy and don't like a lot of regulations, but I think AI is one of those instances where we've all got to get together and kind of lay some ground rules down. That was a diatribe. I don't know if that even comes close to answering the question, but.
I would see a lot, like, for example, the whole Ariana Grande and Cynthia Rio situation. There's a lot of articles saying that they're in like this semi-identity relationship, but if you do like a simple like fact check, like it's been denounced if they like say no, this is fake. So like someone literally is making fake news, and like people are sharing this because they want to believe it. And so like, and I'm commenting in the comment section, hey girl, just letting you know this isn't real, but some people take it the wrong way.
They do, and they don't want to be wrong, and nobody wants to be wrong on social media or told they're wrong, and I'm one of those that just doesn't think you can win an argument. There's no point in arguing on social media because you can't win one. You'll never change somebody's mind on social media, I don't think, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. when you feel like it's particularly egregious or needs to be called out. So just as respectfully as you can, and that's been the best way that I've ever found to deliver some bad news, is to do it respectfully and say, I'm not trying to be your enemy here. I just want you to have all the facts.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make this make sense. But going back to, people getting news from other people on social media, particularly it can be influencers or, other people in the community, etc. Based on the research that was done, regarding trust in social media news versus professional news, do you guys know if maybe it's, like if one of those reasonings is because, okay, well you have this professional newsroom that talks about everything and anything and everything, and they can kind of make up what they want, or versus this person online that I watch all the time and I have respect for, like almost like a personal connection, if that makes sense. Do you find that that might be the reason that people try to, because I have a lot of classmates and peers that'll be like, oh, I only get my news from TikTok.
Yeah.
So do you think that that could be a reason as to why that is?
I do, and I think one of the real issues is that, particularly on Facebook, and I'm sure it's prevalent on TikTok, but when one of your friends shares something, and you automatically give that credit where it doesn't necessarily deserve credit because it came from somebody that's either your friend or who thinks like you do. So that's a real. It's social media itself is not the problem. It's the use of social media. 10 years ago, I guess it was, when the Arab Spring occurred, and social media was really a part of folks that were in the middle of all of that sharing valuable information. You really had the idea that this could be a real game changer and bring the world closer. And here 10 years later, I hate to nearly end on such a bleak note, but I just really think it's driven us further apart. And that's a real shame. But that's because we continue to live in our own silos. And what makes you all different is that this career, you won't be living in a silo. You'll be learning more about the world, and you will know more about the world than a lot of people that you report the news to. And that's why there used to be a whole lot of trust in the media, but there's just so many ways to sow division now.
I did have one other follow-up question for the question that I asked earlier about the mission statements and things like that. For the news organizations that have developed a mission statement or core values, particularly in Alabama, because I saw the ones, because that's where I'm from. Do you know if they've seen any kind of I guess has the public had a different reception to these news organizations after they put out these mission values? Does the center find that there's a little bit more trust put in these organizations after they're implemented?
I can't answer that because my involvement in this is so relatively new. So there's no data that I can share to that point, but I certainly hope that's the case. But it's just a small step forward in trying to affirm our commitment to objectivity and transparency. Time for lunch?